So, so this would be just kind of like an added bonus, bonus message tonight. Bonus. But again, I work off of what God is dealing with me on and what He's showing me, revealing me, right? Revealing to me. And so this has been having a powerful effect. So I want to talk just briefly, 10, 15 minutes, on the power of prayer and fasting. Because we don't talk about this a lot. And it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about a lot. And you know what? We fast. Stacy and I fast fairly regularly, but probably not as much as we should. Back when I was going to Destiny Church down in Burnsville, they do like the Daniel fast down there, where you eat just fruits and vegetables. No meat, no sugar, no bread, no cheese, just no dairy, no cheese, no stuff like that. And that was the first time I'd ever fasted. This is years ago. But it was back when I was still fighting through the lust and the pornography and stuff. And that first fast, was huge in breaking some of that. And so we've been just fasting here for the last 5-6 days. But it's just it's just amazing how powerful it is, how it just lightens things. It brings for me, it seems like I can just enter into the presence of God so much more quickly. I don't know. It just feels like you're just so much closer with God. I mean, I know He's in here. But it's just that sense, right? But just look at this real quick. Go to Matthew chapter 6. I want to show you guys this. So Matthew 6:6, but thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathens do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Now the point I simply want to make here is he says, but you, when you pray. He says when you pray. He doesn't say if you pray. Okay? He says when you pray. So there's clearly an indication here, you're expected to pray, and you're expected to pray regularly. He said when you pray. Okay? Now go to verse 17. I think it's 17. Yes, verse 17. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thy head and wash thy face. Again, he doesn't say if you fast. He says, but when you fast. See, when Jesus was on the earth, he was walking with his disciples, and the Pharisees came and they said, well, why is it that your disciples do not fast? And he says, well, look, hey, you can't fast while the bridegroom is with them. But he says, but when the bridegroom shall leave, then they shall fast. Again, clearly indicating he expects us to fast. Fasting is a regular part of our walk with God. Now, go to 2 Peter chapter 1. And verse 5. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5. And beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity or love. Watch this. In verse 5, he says, add to your faith virtue. Virtue. Remember what he said when the woman with the issue of blood, when she touched his hem? What did it say? She touched his hem and virtue went out of him. He's saying add to your faith virtue or power. Add to your faith power. Add to your faith power. Add to your faith power. power. Add to your faith power. Okay? Now, go to Psalm 63. We're going to look at verses 1 and 2. O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee, my flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is, to see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. So what is he saying here? He's saying in order to find that power, you have to fast. You have to fast. You've got to be thirsting and hungering for him and not for food. You've got to be hungering and thirsting for him and not for food. I heard one man say this. He said, people are selling their birthright for some food. Okay, do you know what I'm talking about by that? Because remember, that was the whole thing with Jacob and Esau. Esau was the older. He was the one that was supposed to get the blessing. But he sold it. He sold his birthright to Jacob because Jacob had just made this big pot of stew. And Esau had been out hunting because he was really good at hunting. That was like his deal. He was just good at killing animals. And he'd come back from hunting all day and he was starving. And he came back and he had no food to eat, but Jacob had this big pot. And so Jacob said, well, look, I'll give you some food, but give me your birthright. And he gave it to him. He gave him his birthright. He sold his birthright to Jacob for some food. And he said that's what's happening so much with us today, is especially with the way we have access to fast food and McDonald's and Burger King and Culver's and all these different places. Believe me, I love fast food. I'm not, but that's why, because it's so, you know what I mean? It's so bad, right? And it's so easy. But what he's saying is he's saying people are selling their birthright with God for some food by putting food over God. By putting food over God. See, I know this isn't an exciting message, but it's a powerful one, because this is what will take your power with God to the next level. See, you have to pray and fast. And it's not just fasting, because just fasting in itself, if you're not praying and fasting, I mean, you're just basically on a diet, right? Which is a good thing too. Don't get me wrong there, right? But what I'm saying is, if you want the intent, the what it was intended for, it's prayer and fasting. It's prayer and fasting. They go together. So when you're fasting, man, you're praying, Lord, take me to the next level. Lord, break this off. Lord, break these ways of the flesh off of me, Lord, right? And you're praying, you're going after him. Man, I'll tell you, another time I fasted, I believe this wholeheartedly, that the fast that I did back years ago was what opened the door for me to walk into the job with Accenture working from home, which I've been praying for. Because we're doing the fast again. This is back at Destiny. We're doing the fast, and we're in the middle of the fast. And there was a Wednesday night service in January. And Pastor was doing the offering. And I'd been praying and believing for the Lord, for a job working from home, making X amount of dollars. And that night, this was Wednesday. I think I usually got paid on Tuesdays. And so I just gotten paid that day before. And the Lord said to me, I want you to sow your whole paycheck tonight. My whole paycheck? Lord, how am I going to pay rent? I mean, what am I going to do? I can't just sow my whole paycheck. What are you, crazy? He said, sow your whole paycheck. I said, okay. He said, sow it towards, right, what are you believing for with this seed? And so I put on there, this is a seed towards my job, my dream job, working from home, making X amount of dollars every year. Now that was January. So I did that. I mean, it's powerful, right? Sowed it. Well, nothing happened. Nothing happened. February, nothing happened. March, nothing happened. April, nothing happened. May, nothing happened. June, nothing happened. July, nothing happened. August, nothing happened. September, nothing happened. Finally, in October, 9 months later, that job, just out of nowhere, fell right into my lap. And I'd already been working for Accenture, but I was working in a different area of the company, so I wasn't able to work from home. I didn't even know that they had that as an option. And I'd been a contractor with them, and the contract was coming to an end, and they said, well, look, we want to hire you permanently. And I was like, no. It didn't make sense in the natural. I'm like, well, but I just felt like, no, Dad, I don't want to do that. Doesn't seem right. So I turned them down. And they said, okay, well, I guess if you don't want this job, this other area they're hiring and within Accenture, do you want to talk to them? I said, sure. So do a quick phone interview. Got the job like that. I show up, first day of work, just thinking, okay, I'm going to go and get trained and work in the downtown office. After I'm there for a couple hours, she's like, it was like noon. She's like, well, you can go home, work from home the rest of the day. I said, what? She said, yeah, we work from home. I didn't even know. I didn't even know it. It just happened. And at that time, even before I accepted that job, I had 2 other offers that had to make a decision on. Like, okay, well, here's this one, and the other one had the potential to work from home, but it was only like maybe a couple days a week, they were saying, maybe 2 or 3. And I just was like, well, I don't know. I just feel like this is the way to go. And I was talking with a friend of mine. He's like, well, I think I was talking with a friend. I think I was talking with the Lord about it. And the Lord said, well, if fear were not involved in your decision making in any way, which one would you choose? And I said, well, I'd choose the Accenture job. Oh, okay then. And so that's the one I chose. And then it just opened up. The Lord just, and that was 9 years ago. Well, I mean, 8.5, I suppose you say, but that all started from a place of fasting, prayer and fasting, prayer and fasting, prayer and fasting, prayer and fasting. In 2 Corinthians 11:27, Paul said he was in fastings often. He was in fastings often. Kenneth Hagin said he lived a fasting lifestyle. He fasted all the time. He should always be fasting. Go to Isaiah 58. Yes, Isaiah 58. Let's start in verse 4. Behold, you fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. You shall not fast as you do this day to make your voice to be heard on high. Is it such a fast that I have chosen? A day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you should break every yoke? See, he's starting to give you an indication of what a fast is intended to do. A fast, when you do it right and you do it with God, it'll loose the bands of wickedness, it'll undo all the heavy burdens, and it sets you free of all oppression. And it breaks every yoke on top of that. So any areas where the enemy is trying to oppress you, man, you come into a time of prayer and fasting, and that stuff just starts breaking off. That stuff just starts breaking off. You might not even know what's happening there. But you just know there's something kind of just not going the way it ought to be in your life. Maybe you don't even notice it at all. But man, it breaks all that stuff, all that junk off your life. Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh? Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily. So it brings healing. If you've got issues in your body, prayer and fasting brings healing. And thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Lord, watch this now, the glory of the Lord shall be thy reward, which means your rear guard. Now, I want you to think about this. I never saw this before. He says, the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. If you go through Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 17, and you look at all of the armor of God, the helmet of salvation, the belt of truth, your feet shod with the gospel of peace, the sword of the Spirit, the breastplate of righteousness, and the shield of faith. Now, if you look at all that stuff, where is all that stuff? It's all on the front. Fasting brings the glory of the Lord as your protection for your rear side, your backside. Fasting brings that protection so he's all around, like we were talking about earlier. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by God. See, and that's what fasting does. It brings the glory of the Lord to surround us and protect us, because we're keeping that flesh put under. See, when you're crucifying the flesh like that by fasting, and yeah, you're using an area with food but I think that's because that's probably the strongest area. Food and probably sex and maybe money, I suppose, is probably the top three, I guess, in terms of, or greed. You'd say greed in terms of money. I mean, you know what I mean? Money in itself, it's just money, but you're starving that flesh, and so it lets your Spirit of God, your spirit inside, and the Spirit of God inside of you, to come more alive, to be more in charge, so that Christ that is living in you is more in charge and not your flesh. See, because if your flesh is dominating, well, that's where all the doubt, that's where all the fear, that's where all the frustration, that's where all those things come from. And remember, the flesh is what connects you to the enemy. I mean, what does he do? He comes and puts pressure on your flesh. That's what he does. He can't touch your spirit, so he puts pressure on your flesh, on your soul, on your body. But when your flesh is crucified from fasting, if it's crucified, it's not affected. He can put all the pressure he wants. Your flesh is dead. What's it going to do? Your flesh is dead. So your spirit's alive. The Spirit of God that's inside of you, that's what's in control, and not your flesh. Matthew chapter 17, please. And this is where we'll wrap it up here. This is the last point I want to make on this. So this man had brought his son to the disciples, and he had a devil, and they couldn't cast him out. And so they brought him to Jesus and said, look, verse 19, then came the disciples of Jesus apart and said, well, why could we not cast him out of the boy? You taught us what to do. We were doing the right things. We were doing exactly what you told us to do. Why didn't it go out? Why couldn't we cast it out? They weren't praying some off-the-wall prayer. They were doing exactly what Jesus had taught them to do. And Jesus said unto them, because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, and you shall say unto this mountain, render hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Howbeit, this kind goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting. Well, what is he saying to him? He's saying, look, you need the power necessary to cast this out of the boy, and you didn't have it because you need to get into prayer and fasting. Too much food. Too much food. He said it goes out by no other way than by prayer and fasting to generate the power necessary to drive that devil out of there. See, it's always a battle of power. Now, the devil has no power. We talked about Romans 13:1. There's no power but of God. Matthew 28:18. All power in heaven and earth has been given unto me. That's what Jesus said. And I give it unto you. So he has no power. But he'll bring lies, deception to try to make you think that he has power. And they will only respond to the power of God. And that's why the prayer and faith is so important, because that's what brings that power of God to freely flow through you, so your flesh isn't clogging it up from letting it out. See, the power's already in you, but you have to have the freedom and the faith for it to be freely flowing out of you. And that's when you can then cast that devil out of that boy, or out of whatever situation is confronting you and you've been having a struggle with. You got something you've been battling with, and you've been battling and battling and battling. Get into a time of prayer and fasting. And watch what breaks off your life. Watch just how deep you go into the communion with God, into his presence. Watch how much more revelation just starts pouring into you. Because the flesh is out of the way. That's what I got for you. Praise the Lord. Whew! All right.